And as my anger, my sense of outrage and betrayal, and cold rage built up, I found myself looking forward to what was to come on Thursday. I waited until late afternoon to call Barry, wanting to give his people as much time as possible. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to my usual place to get a haircut, and then instead of going back to the office, I went into the diner, settled at a table in the back with a cup of coffee, and made the call. Barry and I talked on the phone for almost an hour. I asked a lot of questions, made sure I understood everything he was telling me, and discussed various options with him. When we finally finished, he wished me luck, and we said goodbye. I had what I needed, and I was going to move on. That night, like the previous ones, I earned an Oscar at home by treating Gina with the same tenderness as usual. I won't claim to be a better liar or actor than she was, but I guess I was just as good. We had dinner of fried chicken prepared by Carmelita, watched a movie on TV. And it occurred to me that this would probably be the last time I have sex with Gina, probably the last time I touch her at all. I left early on Friday, not wanting to talk to Gina again, and had a quick breakfast on the way to the office. I took Gina's car, a BMW convertible. I was sure her car hadn't been messed with, and I wanted to get to work alive today. When she discovered her car was gone, she would no doubt be annoyed, but by the end of today, she would care the least. When Meredith arrived around 9 o'clock, I called her into my office, wished her a good morning, and handed her the list I had compiled. "I'll have to change my schedule for today," I said. "Will you please take care of getting this all set up for me?" She looked at my list, and I saw her eyes widen. She looked up at me in surprise, clearly expecting an explanation. But when I remained silent, she just nodded her head and said, "Okay, boss, I'll take care of it." I smiled at her, and she walked out of the office. My morning was pretty eventful, except for a 10 o'clock appointment with Nancy Liet. She was one of the principals of Liet and Hine, a PR firm that had worked for Apex for about 6 years and had become a good friend of mine. Nancy was an attractive, businesslike woman about my age. She was very witty and had a great sense of humor. In fact, she was one of the few women I might have dated had I not been married to Gina. We talked in my office for almost an hour in quiet voices, with the radio on full volume so no one would overhear. All they could hear was a Beethoven symphony and a few Strauss waltzes, at my request. Meredith ordered me a sandwich and a soda, which I ate at my desk while reading the newspaper. The real fun was going to start this afternoon, around 1 o'clock. Meredith called to say that Jeff Denham was calling. He'd like to see me right away. I smiled to myself and said, "Tell him I can't see or talk to him right now, Meredith. He can meet me at 4 like I asked." Did that mean Denham had bugged my office? If so, an hour of loud music during my meeting with Nancy Liet would certainly have made him suspicious. But he might also have been wary of something else. Perhaps he tapped Meredith's phone or her office and heard her making arrangements for the day I'd asked her to take care of. Either way, I knew he was going crazy, and the thought gave me great pleasure. "Wait, you bastard, it's going to get worse." I walked into the conference room a few minutes before 1 o'clock and found it set up exactly as I had requested. The large conference table was empty except for the company laptop at one end, which was open and working. At the far end of the room was a video camera on a tripod, with one of our technicians standing behind it, ready to shoot. "Hello," I said. "It's Arthur, isn't it?" He smiled broadly, recognizing that he was remembered. "Yes, Mr. McMillan. Arthur Warner. Everything is set up and ready to go. Would you like me to stay and run it, or shall I just show you how it works?" "Just show me, please, Arthur. I want him to work all day filming the meetings I'm going to have here." He set it up to block off the part of the room where me and my guests would be sitting, and we did a quick 30-second test. Everything worked perfectly. "The film cartridge is rated for 6 hours, so you'll be just fine, Mr. McMillan," he said. I thanked Arthur, and he left. I fiddled with my laptop for a minute, then set it to screensaver mode and leaned back in my chair. Not 2 minutes later, Josh Daniels knocked on the door and walked in hesitantly. It was finally starting. "Josh, Come in and have a seat, please, I said with a friendly smile. You don't mind if we record the meeting, do you? He looked worried and confused. Alex, what's wrong? We'll get to that in a minute. Did you understand what I asked Meredith to tell you? This meeting is completely confidential. You agree not to talk about any aspect of it with anyone at Apex, now or in the future. He shrugged, still feeling awkward. Yeah, sure, Alex. You're the boss. Is everything okay with the shooting? I guess so, yes, but why are all these? I interrupted him. Hold on a second, Josh. In a few minutes, everything will be clear. I leaned back in my chair, looking at him with an indifferent expression and watching his confusion. Then I finally spoke. Josh, I know all about you and my wife. He became visibly agitated, trying in vain to appear calm. He couldn't keep his eyes on my eyes, which were fixed on him. They kept slipping away from my face. Alex, I don't know what you're talking about. No need to pretend, Josh. I have the pictures. I uttered that lie with complete confidence, patting the thick manila folder lying next to me on the table. But now I'd like to hear all about it from you, please. You're in really deep, and if you're not completely honest with me, it's only going to get worse. I'd been involved in some pretty tough negotiations in my business career, but I'd never seen a man who looked more miserable than Josh did at that moment, and I savored every moment of his misery, waiting for him to try to get out of what he'd been caught doing. After a moment, he said, Alex, can we turn the camera off? No, we can't. Just keep going, Josh. I'm waiting. When did it start, and how could you justify entertaining the boss's wife for months behind his back? He kept his eyes on the table. Jesus, Alex. This started about 4 years ago and lasted about 3 months, I think. You know all of this. Gina seduced me, that's what it was, pure and simple. Linda and I knew you and her for years, and she was always a bit of a flirt. God, who wouldn't be with a body like that? He stopped suddenly, shuddering slightly at the thought of how that sounded. I just waited, and finally, he continued. Anyway, one day she flirted heavily with me at a Christmas party we were having in that old ballroom. It was pretty obvious she was flirting with me, but I couldn't believe she meant it. Then, 2 weeks later, she called me when you were in Chicago and asked me to come to her house. When I came in, she offered me this. I couldn't believe it. I tried to leave, I swear to God, but she dragged me inside, locked the door, and just stood across from me, looking at me with a smile on her face. Then she said something crazy, like, I've wanted you for a long time, Josh, and now I'm going to have you. I'm sorry, Alex. Really sorry. I feel like the world's worst right now, but I was 38 years old, and never in my life had I even kissed a woman as amazing as Gina. I knew it was wrong, but I let it happen. A team of guys with flamethrowers couldn't have gotten me out of there. She took my hand, led me to the bedroom, and we, had sex for 2 hours. Josh sat with his head down on his hands and stared at the floor, completely defeated. How long did it last and how did it end? That's the way it was. Then suddenly one day, she declared she'd had enough and wasn't even particularly nice about it. I'm sure it was because I didn't want to do what she wanted. And what was that? I asked for the first time since the confession began. He looked up at me, now he could look me in the face. She wanted me to create some fake accounts to siphon money out of Apex. It was about the money, Alex, and nothing else, he said. She had all those millions, and she wanted most of it for herself. She asked me a lot of questions in bed, after about how our accounting systems worked, whether it was somehow possible to create fake accounts, how dangerous it was, and so on. At first, I thought it was just a joke, but she brought it up over and over again. In the end, I just said I wasn't going to do it. He straightened in his chair. I won't lie to you, Alex, not anymore. I didn't refuse out of morality, out of loyalty to you, or Apex. By then, I was willing to do anything just to be with Gina, but I didn't see a way to do what she wanted without significant risk of getting caught. And I didn't want to go to jail, even for her. When Gina realized I really wasn't going to do it, she just dumped me. And it was a good thing, because Linda was sure I was having an affair. But it was over before she could get proof. I denied it over and over, just lying and lying and lying and lying, swearing it was nothing more than a bunch of extra projects at work. I don't think she really believed me, but she kind of let it go, and I did everything I could to make it up to her. And thank God we're still together. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Much of what Josh had told me was news to me. Barry's people had managed to find evidence of the affair, lots of phone conversations between Josh and Gina, and a few steamy emails from her to him, and they pinpointed the dates. But Josh's story that Gina was the instigator was new information, as were her hopes of stealing money from the company. I stood up. Okay, Josh, we're done for the day. Go home for the weekend. Don't come back to your office, and don't say a word about this conversation to anyone inside or outside the company. Is that clear? I spoke in a neutral, cold tone. Yes, Alex, he sounded resigned and scared. I mean, we'll talk on Monday, Alex. In the meantime, just go home to Linda and the kids. My conversation with Eddie Kryler at 1:30 p.m. went something like this. Eddie rose through the ranks at Apex. He ran global sales and marketing, and then became the number 2 operations director under me. Of course, according to phone and email records, Gina had chosen him a few months after her breakup with Josh, and it had been over 6 months. He was single, so the two of them didn't have to be so careful. And as Eddie recounted, Gina had brought up the prospect of stealing from the company little by little, probably not wanting to scare him. According to him, it had started out as a joke between them and only gradually turned into something serious that she wanted him to do. According to him, he even sketched out several possible options, but never found one that didn't put him at too much risk. Honestly, Alex, it was because the company is well run. The controls on our finances are strict, and I didn't see how I could pull it off. And when I finally admitted it to Gina, she was done. My conversation with Bernard Eisenhart, Apex's treasurer, took a very different turn. When I said, "Bernie, I know all about you and my wife," he looked at me with a blank stare, his expression astonished but not at all upset. "What do you mean, Alex?" "Bernie, I have pictures right here." I held out a manila folder. "There's no point in denying it?" "Pictures?" He was a little angry. "I don't know what you've got there, Alex, but if they're pictures of what I think they are, you need to be talking to Gina, not me." I turned my back and got out of there. I believed him, too. His irritation was so obvious, and Barry told me that they hadn't found anything between him and Gina except for one phone call from her to him. "Okay, Bernie, I believe you. Could you tell me about it, please?" He was still furious. "She invited me, Alex, blabbed some to me about a surprise party, wanted to see what you liked, not that it made much sense to me. And when I got there, well, you've seen the pictures. Dressed in a see-through nightie that didn't reach her hips, she pulled me inside, kissed me, and tried to put her tongue in my mouth. I'm sure it's in the pictures." "What happened next?" "I told her I couldn't do anything to her, that she was married to my boss, unlocked the door, and walked out to my car. I just sat there, waited for my boner to go away, and then drove off. I didn't think there was any point in telling you, Alex. Nothing happened, and frankly, I was afraid you'd blame me instead of Gina. So, I just let it go, and now you're blaming me." His voice rose with anger, and I interrupted him. "Calm down, Bernie, calm down. Let me explain. I just found out that Gina cheated on me with at least 2 other employees of the company, and I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it. I believe you. I believe that nothing happened between you two." His anger vanished, replaced by surprise. 2 more men? Jesus, he sat back down. "Actually, I remember there were rumors about her and Josh a few years ago. I didn't believe it, of course. Figured that's what people would say considering how attractive she was. But after she made that crazy lunge in my direction, I even wondered. But it was none of my business anyway. We talked for a few more minutes. I assured him of my trust, reassured him that I hadn't accused him, and reminded him to keep our conversation completely confidential. Then, he left. As I sat pondering what I had learned, Meredith walked into the conference room. "Alex, Jeff Denham is outside, and he's practically jumping out of his skin. I know you asked me to make an appointment for 4 o'clock, but he's about to wet himself. Says he has to see you right this minute, that it's life and death and so on. If it weren't for the guards you asked me to post outside the room, he'd be in here by now. What do you want me to do with him?" I smiled at her. "Give me 5 minutes, and then you can let him come in." I wanted to spend those 5 minutes enjoying what was about to happen. It's not every day you find out your best friend wants you dead, and it's certainly not every day you get a chance to even. When Jeff Denham entered the conference room, he was practically shaking. He looked like a man who had been put on an espresso drip, though he tried to hide it. "Hey, Alex, what's going on?" It was said with careful casualness, but his voice was a few tones higher than usual. "Hey, Dow, thanks for stopping by. Would you like some coffee or something?" He shook his head. "What kind of video camera is that?" I smiled and said, "I just thought I might need a record of the meetings I'm having today. You don't mind, do you?" He looked very worried, but all he said was, "Not at all." "Of course not. But what's the mystery?" Meredith didn't say anything to me, and when I passed Bernie Eisenhart coming out of the elevator, he just gave me a strange nod and went on his way. I turned the laptop around so it was in front of him and said, "Take a look." When he touched the embedded mouse, the screensaver disappeared, revealing a still frame from a video shot in my bedroom earlier that week. It showed a naked Gina lying on her back, legs spread wide, and a naked Jeff with his head buried between her legs and his hands around her hips, devouring her. She threw her head back in sheer ecstasy. Denham looked up at me, a split second later, a look of shock on his face. I waited until he said, "Alex, and then I hit him with my right fist right under his right eye as hard as I could. He flew backward, hitting his head on the carpet, and the chair slid smoothly away from the table. I stood over him, pulling the thick winter glove off my hand. It still hurt like hell, but at least I didn't think I'd broken my knuckles. I sat for a while, smiling grimly and massaging my sore arm, waiting for Denham to come to his senses. It was several minutes before he opened his eyes and groaned, groping his face with his hand. When his head cleared a little, he looked around for me, then quickly crawled away from me and sat against the wall, looking both confused and wary. "You want more, you nasty freak?" "I can still hit you with my other hand," I spoke casually, almost flippantly. "God, no, Alex." I saw him look toward the door as if figuring out if he could break free or if I'd catch him before he got to it. "Forget it, Dow. Those 2 guards are still outside. You're not leaving just yet." We sat for a while longer, and I watched him sullenly ponder his situation. No doubt he hoped that I did not know everything, but he was bitterly disappointed. "Okay, Dow, get up and sit back down at the table. Don't worry, I'm not going to hit you again. What lies ahead of you is going to hurt a lot more." He cautiously rose and sat down in a chair 10 feet away from me, never taking his eyes off my face. "I'm not going to waste any more time on you, you piece of... my best friend since junior high school. You're a goddamn disgrace." He didn't say anything back, so I continued. "Not only did you entertain my wife and try to steal my money, but you tried to kill me here." He jerked his head sharply, looking at me in shock and alarm. "And I'll make sure you make some new friends in prison." "Gina confessed everything to me," I continued, now lying through my teeth, "and I know that the theft and the murder plan were all your idea. Just being a cuckold wasn't enough for you, huh? Did you think that by cutting me off, you'd complete the picture? For God's sake, Alex, it's not true." There was utter desperation in his voice. "Stop lying. I admit that I had an affair with G. There's no point in denying it now. But stealing the money and then killing you was all her idea. I tried over and over again to talk her out of it, and when that didn't work, you said, "What the hell," and organized to tamper with my car. He hung his head without looking at me. After a few minutes, he told me everything. The affair had started the same way it had with Josh and Eddie. Gina was going full force. He swears he fought her off 2 or 3 times before he gave in, but that doesn't really matter, does it? When she had been having fun with him for about 3 months, she talked about stealing some of my money. Unlike previous co-conspirators, Denham was willing to go along. He invented a subsidiary and found a way to have legitimate payments put into accounts receivable and then diverted to the invented company. Because he was head of security, which included the finance division, he managed to make it so that no one else could spy on him closely enough to discover what he was up to. In 7 months, he managed to embezzle about $1.8 million. All of this was pretty much what Barry's people had already figured out, but that wasn't enough for Gina. Alex Denham was speaking freely now, ignoring the camera. He was eager to get his point across. He wasn't such a complete idiot that he didn't feel guilty about what he'd done to me, she said. You had so much money that $1 million or $2 million just wasn't enough for her. It wasn't fair, so I closed the account and covered my tracks as carefully as I could. A month later, she started talking about killing you. Then we could be together, and things like that. You could run the company or let the other fellows run it while you and I spend this fine money. She wouldn't back down. Every time we were together, she had a new idea about what we'd do later when you died, and she inherited your money. And you believed her? He sighed heavily. I was a fool, Alex. I convinced myself that she loved me. I was definitely in love with her, or so I thought. I held on for a long time, and then she started hinting that if I didn't do this for her, we might not be meant to be together. After a few weeks of these conversations, I started to feel like this was my only way out, Alex. Gina is a cold-blooded monster. As soon as she got the idea in her head, she was like a terrier with a bone. She just wouldn't let it go. So finally, I made some calls and found a guy who knew how to do this sort of thing. He said it wouldn't be hard to tamper with the brake line, and if it was done right, no one would suspect a thing. He looked at me with a haggard expression. I know you'll never forgive me, Alex. How can you? But I still can't believe I did it. It's like I was a different person. Like Gina programmed me, and I was following her instructions. Like I was a little monster. And were you going to try again? I already knew the answer, having watched the video Asimov had sent me. In a choked voice, he said, she wanted to. I insisted that we should wait a few weeks so no one would suspect about the car. I tried my best to talk her out of it, but eventually, she'd make me try again. She wasn't going to give up. He covered his face with his hands. Denham was broken. He was finished. He didn't even try to deny the truth. I asked him about the stolen money, and he didn't hesitate to give me the numbers of the 2 offshore accounts where he had stashed it all. But about $60,000, which Gina had already spent. It was a little after 4:30. I handed Denham over to the guards, who would hold him until the police arrived. Then I went back to the conference room to wait for Gina, who was due to arrive at 5 o'clock. With each new revelation, the unbelievable and painful truth grew deeper. My wife was not only having fun with me and stealing my money, she was trying to destroy me. How could a normal person understand that? What did it mean that I had lived with this woman for the most part very happily for over 8 years without having the slightest idea of who and what she really was? Gina walked into the conference room. About 20 minutes late, as usual, looking glamorous and slightly annoyed. Baby, what is all this? Meredith practically ordered me to meet you here, and she hasn't told me anything about what you want. Is there something going on with the company? And why the hell did you leave me without a car this morning? I watched her carefully and realized that the irritation was faint behind it. Gina's concern, in all likelihood. She and Denham had been burning up the phone lines today trying to figure out what was going on. Honey, please sit down, okay? This isn't going to be easy for me. I sat quietly, as if struggling with my emotions, and watched her try to remain calm. I was determined to enjoy every damn minute of it. After a long pause, during which Gina's knee began to wobble nervously, I spoke. "Gina, I know you cheated on me. How could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." She tried to sit still, but her eyes widened, and she tensed slightly. I watched as a look of sadness and compassion appeared on her face. It was impressively fast. She must have expected it. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It's just, I guess you were away from home so much, and I—" She interrupted and began to cry, convincing. I might have softened if I didn't know the whole truth. Still crying, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Alex, is there any way you can forgive me? I don't want to lose you." "I don't know, Gina. I just don't know." Then, after another pause, "I need you to tell me about it. When and how it started and when it ended and why, above all, why did you do it? Oh baby, please don't make me talk about it. We can get through this, you'll see. I can make it up to you. I'll be the best, most perfect wife you could ever have." "No, Gina," I said, giving my voice a cracked tone. "If we can ever get past this, you have to be honest with me here and now. When did it start? How long did it last?" I had her by the thread and enjoyed it. She didn't know which of her lovers I knew about. I had deliberately spoken of her affair in the past tense to make her think it might not be Denham but someone else. Now she had to guess, and if she was wrong, she would confess to an affair I supposedly didn't even know about. Reluctantly, she began to speak. "Like I said, Alex, you were away a lot, and I felt alone, abandoned. I know it's unfair. You've worked so hard and succeeded so well, built a company for both of us, but I let him master me, I guess. And then I had a couple drinks, and when he made the pass, I just gave in. I laughed to myself. Nice try, Gina, but you're not off the hook yet. When was that, Gina? I really need to know." She suddenly rose from her seat, walked around the table, and tried to throw herself into my arms. With tears in her eyes, "Alex, I'm so sorry," but I held her at arm's length, still looking into her eyes, and asked, "When was that?" I saw the mental calculations appear and disappear in her eyes in a split second. She sighed, sat down in the chair next to me, and said, "A little over 4 years ago." She had bet on Josh Daniels. I grinned to myself. Nice try, Gina, too bad you don't know there's no such thing as the right choice. And she looked at me, irritation peeking out slightly behind the mask of sadness, but she realized she really had no choice. And it went on for months. I don't know why, Alex, I just went a little crazy. I knew it wasn't right, and finally just told Josh that I couldn't see him anymore. It was ruining me. I cried the whole time, and Josh. I interrupted her with a shout. "You cheated on me with Josh too?" If you could have seen the look on her face at that moment, in desperation, with eyes widened with fear, she said, "Baby, I don't understand." "What else?" I yelled at her. "You slept with 2 of my employees. What the hell were you thinking?" She tried to rush in to slow me down, but I was on edge. "For God's sake, Gina, how can we fix this? How can I ever trust you again? God, everyone at Apex must be laughing at me behind my back. The boss's wife takes care of the employees. Just stay in line, she'll get to you soon enough. Who else have you been having fun with? The janitor? No, baby, I swear, it was only 2. And how am I supposed to believe that?" I demanded. "As far as I know, you've had fun with everyone I've ever dealt with. Did you have fun with Dan Cameron before he left? How about our friend Archie, or Debbie's husband Peter, or Doll? How can I be sure, Gina?" She saw her opportunity and jumped up. Her face took on a solemn expression, and she reached out and took both my hands in hers. In a quiet, serious voice, she said, "Alex, God knows it was just those 2, and that was years ago. I regretted it so much. I've been completely faithful to you ever since, and I will be for the rest of my life." There was silence in the room. I looked at her tiredly, sadly, hiding the angry joy I felt at her impending doom. "Okay, Gina," I said slowly, "okay. You cheated on me with 2 of my coworkers, but then you stopped. You picked yourself up and decided to go back to being my faithful wife, is that right?" "Yes, baby," she said, and there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Well, I guess I need to ask you one more thing," I said, sliding the laptop over to her. "Can you tell me what it is?" I touched 2 keys this time. As the splash screen disappeared, the video came into motion. We saw Jeff's head bobbing between Gina's thighs, saw her arch her back in pleasure, and heard her harsh voice. "Oh yes, yes, oh baby, oh doll, do it, yes, baby, do it." I had to hand it to Gina. She didn't jump away from the laptop like it was a snake, didn't try to run out of the room, didn't even shriek. Just a quick choke almost as soon as it started. Then, after a few seconds, she closed the laptop and turned to face me. Moments before, her face had become almost unrecognizable. Now, it was a tight, angry mask, eyes glittering, and mouth contorted into a strained grin. "Okay, Alex, you got me. Good for you. What do you want me to say?" "Yes, I had fun with Doll, and he did it way better than you ever could." "Really, Gina? Does that explain why you tried to destroy me?" The question shook her. She froze, staring at me for a moment, and the best she could manage was, "What? I have no idea what you're talking about." "Really?" I said softly. I opened the computer, pressed a few buttons, and turned it so she could see. On the screen was our kitchen, with Gina and Doll sitting at the table, both in bathrobes. Gina was talking. "I don't care, Doll. So we got unlucky and he didn't wreck the car. You can try again. Gina, you don't realize how risky this is. If someone starts investigating what happened, they'll. The car burned up, right? Completely destroyed, along with a bunch of others. Who would suspect anything? We just need some other way to destroy it. Can't we poison it?" I pressed a button, and the computer went silent. I smiled at Gina. "I wish I had that video, baby. It's going to be really hard to stand in court and deny you had anything to do with it." I stared into Gina's cold eyes as the wheels turned behind them. She was like a rat caught in a nasty trap, looking for a way out at every corner. She made no further attempt to look regretful or even affectionate. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and contemptuous. "You'll never go to the police with that, Alex. It would make you a laughingstock, and it would make Apex a laughingstock. The head of a multi-billion-dollar company and his wife entertains the employees. You'll be the world's fool." She sat there with a satisfied and contemptuous look. I picked up the phone and asked Meredith to get Nancy lead when she came in. She sat across the table from Gina and me, looking at my wife as if she were a bag of dirty laundry. "Nancy, my lovely wife G thinks it would be bad for me in the business if I arrested her for grand larceny and attempted murder. Why don't you tell her what you told me this morning?" Smiling broadly, Nancy said, "Of course, Alex. This story, Gina and Denham and their dastardly plot, is going to be the loudest story on cable news for some time to come. It has everything: money, adultery, attempted murder, an extremely attractive woman, a man betraying his best friend. Yes, anything. It will be bigger than Paris Hilton, bigger than the Anna Nicole Smith saga. Gina will be Harlot of the Month for a while, and Apex will get more publicity than it has ever gotten in its entire existence, more than it could buy with $500 million in advertising, all for free. Alex will end up on the Larry King Show, the Today Show, little else. He'll be an honest, hard-working businessman victimized by an unprincipled puppet. By the time the trial is over and Gina and Denham are in jail, Apex will be written about in Business Week and the Wall Street Journal. Someone will give Alex the Entrepreneur of the Year award, the company will get maybe $100 million in new business, and Alex will get 10,000 letters from women just dying to be the next Mrs. McMillan. Some of them will send pictures. It's a godsend for Apex. Your husband, Gina, isn't having much fun, at least not right now, but you're about to make a rich, successful man even richer and more successful. As his public relations representative, I couldn't dream of coming up with something this good. Nancy winked at me, then stood up and left the room. Gina leaned back in her chair, her eyes slightly unfocused and her mouth drooping in a deep, wry smile. For perhaps the first time in all the years I'd known her, she looked completely defeated. I picked up the phone. Meredith, you can call the police. The next 14 months may or may not have made up for what came before them, it's hard to say. But they brought their share of entertainment. The police charged Gina and Denham with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and 6 or 7 other things. Apex's attorneys also immediately filed a civil suit to recover the stolen money, the whereabouts of which we knew because of Denham's confession. And of course, I immediately filed for divorce on grounds of adultery. Fortunately, because of the criminal and civil lawsuits, all of Denham's accounts and all of Gina's and mine that she had access to were frozen. By the time the two of them were released on bail, they didn't have the money to hire expensive lawyers to defend themselves and had to make do with public defenders for a while, rather unpleasant. I kicked Gina out of the house and had no trouble getting a restraining order from the judge. The video of her and Denham discussing a second attempt to kill me was quite compelling. She got Susan, one of her tennis buddies, to temporarily put her up in Susan's guest house. Gina made no attempt to contact me, not that I expected or wanted her to. She must have realized there was nothing she could say to change anything. The Monday after Gina's day of reckoning, I called Josh and Eddie in and fired each of them. Neither of them was much surprised. Eddie asked only that in case a future employer came to me for a reference, I'd be prepared to say that his work at Apex had been good. I had no problem agreeing. Josh tried to make a deal with me. If I helped him find a decent job, he would agree to testify against Gina at her trial. I laughingly kicked him out of my office. I reminded him that I already had his adultery confession and her attempt to get him to steal from the company on tape. If he didn't agree to testify, the prosecutors would just issue him a subpoena. I have appointed Bernie Eisenhart as Josh's CFO, and I am confident that he will do a top-notch job. I have asked him to take on the job of interviewing for his own replacement as treasurer and for Eddie's position. Gina and Denham's trial started about 7 months later, and it was a lot of fun. It lasted almost 3 weeks. I went to court several times, but didn't feel the need to be there every day. Not surprisingly, they were unable to deny what they had done, and each attorney's defense focused on making the other look like the main villain. Gina's main virtues were her beauty and her ability to behave on the witness stand. The men on the jury ate her up. The problem, of course, was that the videotape clearly showed her pushing a reluctant doll to make another attempt on my life, and even Gina couldn't overcome that. They were both found guilty on about 8 counts, including all the main ones. By the end of the trial, all this publicity had allowed Gina to sign several magazine and television interview contracts, which allowed her to pay for an expensive lawyer. The new attorneys have appealed, and so far have managed to delay sentencing, but Gina and Dee faced 10 to 15 years. All of the money they stole was returned to Apex, less $72,000, since Denham's security firm had gone out of business. I needed someone to take over that role for Apex. When I flew to Los Angeles to pay Barry SM off and thank him for all he had done, he suggested I hire David Caros. David wanted to move to the Bay Area, and you've seen how well he's doing. I think you won't regret offering him a contract, and with you as his primary client, he can build his business there. So I offered Carlos a job, and it seems to be going very well so far. When I was in Asimov's office, he surprised me with another video I didn't know about. I hadn't had time to talk to him before, and it had nothing to do with the threat from Gina and Denham. Come into the screening room for a moment, Alex. I think you'll enjoy it. To my surprise and delight, in bed with Gina lay Charlie Pton, my lawyer. He was almost 60 and didn't seem to be giving Gina much pleasure. Apparently, Gina had seduced him a couple of months ago and put him to work trying to find a way around our scenario. Not surprisingly, since Charlie was an excellent lawyer and had drafted it himself, he hadn't had much success. But that didn't stop him from taking advantage of Gina whenever she gave him the opportunity. I especially enjoyed setting Charlie's ass on fire. I accused him publicly and as loudly as I could of unethical behavior, and the California Board of Legal Ethics had no choice but to disbar him. I also sued him and took about $240,000 from his savings that I donated to charity. All of this gave me great pleasure. From my perspective and that of Apex, everything unfolded precisely as Nancy Liat had foreseen. Initially, there was a whirlwind of media attention across cable news networks and tabloids. I found myself featured on CNN, gracing the cover of Fortune magazine, and splashed across the front page of the National Enquirer, among many other outlets. The influx of attention necessitated Nancy to hire 3 additional staff members to manage the workload. We convened almost daily to strategize, discerning which interviews and opportunities were worth pursuing. True to Nancy's predictions, Apex experienced nearly a 20% surge in business within the initial 6 months following the article's publication. Nancy's forecasts regarding the flood of letters from women also proved accurate. The count had surpassed 8,000, with no sign of abating. After sifting through the first few hundred, some accompanied by suggestive or explicit photographs, I delegated the task of responding to them to one of my interns. It appeared that this individual was now enjoying a surplus of romantic attention. Not only were local divorcees and single women reaching out, but I found myself propositioned by more women than I had ever imagined existed. Yet, to my surprise, I discovered that I wasn't particularly intrigued by this promiscuous lifestyle. Despite enjoying a fulfilling sexual relationship with Gina before our separation, I embarked on dates with the 4 women I found appealing, only to realize that the allure of casual encounters didn't resonate with me. After spending considerable time collaborating closely with Nancy, I came to the realization that she was the one I wished to pursue romantically. We have now been dating for almost a year. While neither of us feels rushed to wed, it remains a possibility for the future. On my recent birthday, Nancy presented me with a special gift. We spent Saturday evening at her home, indulging in an old Humphrey Bogart film before retiring for the night. Sunday morning, she graciously allowed me to sleep in while she prepared breakfast, which she then brought to the bedroom on a large tray. Upon awakening, I beheld her standing there in her robe, breakfast in hand. With a mischievous grin, she teased about my present being concealed beneath her robe. Intrigued, I raised an eyebrow, prompting her to reveal a white t-shirt adorned with a scanned image of Gina's smiling face, likely sourced from a photo found at my residence. Beneath the image, bold block letters proclaimed, "I survived a monster." Her playful gesture elicited hearty laughter from me, followed by a warm embrace. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next video.